All right, everyone. I think we can go ahead and get started. It's 5:04. We have quite a few people on already. Thank you so much for being here at our What's Next Transforming the Food and Agriculture System call. I'm Daniela. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Green New Deal Network. And we have a packed night tonight with a lot of amazing, amazing speakers. Really, really excited to hear from all of them. So with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it to the National Director of the Green New Deal Network to ground us in this moment, which is, many things. Then we'll jump into the state of play, talk about our broken food system and what we can do, and then we'll talk about our strategy to win. So with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it to Kaniela Ng.
Hi all, it's so great to be here with you all. Uh, thanks for making time to join amid all the chaos that's happening. Uh, we live in the richest nation in the world, and 40% of our land is dedicated to ag, yet we still have so many hungry people, um, kids, without proper nutrition, um, obesity epidemics from food deserts, and some of the worst health outcomes among industrialized states. So, these things were the reality even before this election. So while there's new terrain in having a different administration in office, we know that these problems precede any election, and our work just continues. It's not the beginning, and it's not the end. We know that we need to stop subsidizing commodity crops. We need to break up monopolies and monopsonies, possibly a public option for buying. Um, Farmers should be able to make it on less acreages, and they should be farming for food to feed their own communities, and not just to sell chemicals for some of the richest multinational corporations in the world. There's a corporate business model that's killing rural America, and it needs to change dramatically. So, my background is before I was the director of the Green New Deal Network. I did a lot of climate and land use work in various fashions. I really cut my teeth fighting for land back for Native Hawaiians and sovereignty in Hawaii. But the island that I live on is Maui, or the island I'm from is Maui, and it is the vast majority of the island is agriculture. We're talking like 70%. It was a monocrop. It was sugar, and it's been under oligarchical control from the moment the first colonizers have arrived. And in recess, as a child, it would rain sugarcane ash on me, and we all had asthmatic symptoms, but we couldn't really pinpoint what it was. It was from that, the black snow smelled like melting plastic. Um, so, I didn't realize how bad that was for my health. I also didn't realize like the land use decisions, often very racially charged, um, and anti-poor decisions that were made in order to get us there, up until I was in college. But long story short, it radicalized me a bit on why we keep burning stuff. One, for energy when we don't have to, and two, are there better ways to use all this land on the most beautiful island on Earth? And I came to the realization that we can. And in fact, it will be cheaper. I served in the state legislature for a few terms, and in 2014, we organized a massive campaign to get Monsanto off our islands, essentially. They were spraying restricted use pesticides that were illegal for most farmers, like 2,4-D, and others, just feet away from our elementary schools. You'll have people in like hazmat suits right next to these kids, where the wind would blow. And there's never been a successful ballot initiative in the history of our county. It was purposely made. You have to get like half of all registered voters to sign on, and a lot of those signatures get rejected. It has to be in person. So it's never been done. But we did it. We did the doors. We put petitions in every single business that would let us across the island. And none of it was really digital. It was just all in person. And we got on the ballot. And then we spent around $50,000 that we fundraised on this campaign to Monsanto's 9 million. And we actually ended up winning. Now, the challenge of getting the county to actually fight them once the lawsuit started coming down was a challenge. But just last year, we seen Monsanto completely, or Bayer now, completely leave our islands. So, and we're seeing most of the sugar is gone now. It's no longer profitable, and we're seeing a multitude of crops and new farmer collectives starting to make way and bang up land. Of course, it's not perfect, but because we went so big with our demands and the scale of our work and organized at every level, from the schools to the churches to businesses, regardless of party who you voted for, we were able to make it happen. We want to see those sorts of victories all across America. Um, the it makes no sense that we spend so much money on like the Farm Bill and these subsidies and the Department of Agriculture. Like, what about a Department of Food? How is it that we're seeing we have so much we throw away the vast majority of our food, yet we have so many folks that are hungry. It's really a land use and logistics issue, and the government should be in the business of making things more fair, but instead they're actually stacking the chips and pushing them towards corporations. So yeah, there's this vicious cycle of farmers overproducing, and then prices drop that we gotta actually reverse and turn it into a virtuous cycle. But I'll leave that to some of the experts on this call who do this for a living. But our role is to bring people together and make sure they're connected to folks that can actually build the institutional alignment and grassroots power and governing power to win. So really excited to have you all here. Again, this is only the beginning of the work. And yeah, together we'll make this happen. Thanks, Daniela. Get back to you.
Thank you, Kaniela. Thank you for that wonderful grounding. It's much appreciated. I am going to go ahead and pass it to Naseem to give us our state of play. Naseem, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself. We're excited to hear more.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naseem Ashford, and I cover food and agriculture at the Green New Deal Network. I'm really excited to see all of you all here. It's been some time putting this all together and also just networking and connecting with you all throughout the year. Looking at the state of play, now that we all know that Trump has been elected, we know based off of his first administration that he is likely to, one, focus on deregulating the food and agriculture industry and prioritizing big businesses and big food conglomerates so that they can continue to make profits, as well as deregulating the food standards that were put forth originally and taken away under Donald Trump, as well as environmental protections too, that are likely to be rolled back under Trump. Trump has also promised to deport upwards of 20 million undocumented people, many of them food and agriculture laborers whom our food system depends on, as well as some of his allies have also called for the elimination of the H-2A visa program, which gives farm workers temporary legal status here in the US. As we know, Trump has said many things, but he's also talked about implementing tariffs on food imports. Currently, we have 15% of our food supply with food being imported, which would likely cause consumers to foot the bill and have to cover those costs, as well as not have access to some of the products that they might like or want to eat or engage with. With the likely Republican trifecta, we're looking at intensified deregulation framework with a push to support more corporate agro businesses over local farms, This is primarily really important given the Farm Bill has been stalled over the last year, and the Republicans and others want to cut out funding for SNAP beneficiaries and also remove guardrails for some of the climate smart programs that were implemented in order to reduce emissions and also support farmers in adopting climate smart agriculture techniques. And so at this time, it's really important for us to be aware of all of the changes that are going to be taking place over the next few months. That's something that we're doing on our team, tracking and sharing information. And we look forward to hosting more events where we can bring people together and talk about some of these issues and look for solutions moving forward. And I will pass back to you, Danny, as we get prepared to uh, have some of our speakers come on and talk.
Thank you so much, Nasim. I appreciate it. With that, we are going to pass it over to our first amazing speaker, Jose Oliva from Heal Food Alliance. Jose, we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you, the rest of Green New Deal, for putting together this really important call. We've been actually hoping for a call like this to come out. So I'm really glad to be here on HEAL's behalf. So my name is Jose Oliva. I'm the campaigns director for the Heal Food Alliance, and I'm not going to talk for too long. I want to first just ground us in the reality of our food system. I heard Daniela say that it was a broken food system. I beg to differ with that opinion. I think the food system is working just fine for the people who set it up. And those people who set it up are the same people who used to own slaves, right? These are the descendants of the people who set up the food system and who now own the corporations that run the food system. I don't have to go into consolidation with this group because I'm sure you all know this, but the amount of companies that control our food system grows smaller every day. And the food, the quality of the food that those companies produce gets lower every day. And that is both a function of just capitalism itself and the fact that these companies are looking out for profits and for their shareholders. And also it's a function of the reality that we have companies that are essentially in control of their own regulations. Um, so, the regulations we have as EPA or DOL, whichever folks you are thinking of, are merely suggestions for a lot of these companies. I've worked for over a decade in the labor movement, and we saw budgets, literal budgets of companies that had line items that said government fines, and they literally planned for breaking the law, right? They had it in their budgets. So I just want to say a couple of things about what the future holds or what we see at HEAL as some of the guideposts for where we need to go. First of all, this setback, the election, is not something that is going to diminish or destroy our movement. As a matter of fact, it's giving us a lot of wind beneath our wings, sorry. And it is also something that is inspiring people to think more creatively about how we approach the issues that are affecting our people. So I heard Nasim and I heard Canela talk both about the health impacts, the worker impacts. There's 21.5 million people that work in the food system. Those folks are not just the lowest paid sector of the US economy, they're also the largest. It's the largest sector of the US economy, 21.5 million people. The reason we don't talk about it that way in the public discourse is because they have done a great job of separating the food system workers into agriculture and processing and transportation and retail and so forth. But the food chain is one chain. We all eat the same food. And so that food is being produced by those 21.5 million workers in the US. Um, the reality that the food that we're eating is not only not nutritious, but actually harmful to our health is not a secret either, right? You can go to any public health organization website, American Health Association, any of those, and you'll see that most of the recommendations are around not eating processed foods. That's a known fact, right? And then we have the reality that in our neighborhoods, especially as communities of color, we're being peddled the worst junk food on the market. So the reality of all of those factors in combination with each other uh, means that the food system as a whole needs to be tackled. It can't be piecemeal. You know what happens to a balloon when you squeeze one end, right? The other end pops. So we need to make sure that we get our hands around the food system and that we tackle all of these issues at once. So how do we do that? Procurement is a great lever for this because large institutions like school districts and other large institutions are purchasing millions of dollars worth of food every year. So, as an example, here in Chicago, there's the Chicago Public Schools, CPS, and they purchase approximately $300 million worth of food every year. So, if we could change what food they're purchasing and food that is aligned with our values around human health, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, local economies, and labor, right? Those 5 categories. If we can get food that aligns with all 5 of those value categories, then we are shifting the entire food system because a large purchaser like a school district is actually going to be setting the tone for a lot of what the rest of not just other buyers, but what the companies that are selling the food to those large buyers are buying, right? So we have tools to do this. One of those tools is called the Good Food Purchasing Policy, GFPP. Um, we've been working on this at the state and local level, which, by the way, for the next 4 years, that's going to be where we're going to be focused. But we've been doing this for a decade now. We've been focused on the state and local level. We've passed the GFPP in at least a dozen cities. There's over $1 billion that we've already shifted from these bad actors to not so bad actors, I'm going to say for now, because we still need more. We still need more good food producers, right? We need folks who are growing food, processing food, transporting food, who are good to workers, good to the environment, good to animals, and so forth, right? So that is definitely a need. But for at least the next 4 years, we'll be focused on getting those kinds of policies passed at the state and local level. Um, my final thing, being the organizer that I am, I'm going to leave you all with an ask. Uh, we are today asking the governor of New York to sign the Good Food New York policy. It was passed by the legislature, and even some Republicans voted for it. So I would encourage all of us. I'm going to drop the link in the chat in a second, but I'll encourage all of us to give a call to the governor of New York. And that is all for me. Thank you so much. Pass it right back to the Green New Deal folks. Daniela?
Thank you so much, Jose, for that wonderful reframing. It was incredible. If you have any questions for Jose, please please reach out in the Q&A section. We're not going to have a verbal Q&A, but I'm sure folks will be able to answer in the chat, and we can also follow up after. And then Jose will drop that that link where we can call the governor of New York. I'm going to pass it to our next wonderful speaker, Nia Nyamweya from Beauty Blooms Farm in Montgomery County. Nia, thank you so much for being here, and we're really excited to hear.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Nasim and Green New Deal Network. I'm excited to see some new faces and also introduce myself and talk a bit about the farm, but really excited to connect with you all here. So my name's Nia Nyamweya. I'm the sole owner operator of Beauty Blooms Farm and just finished out our 4th season, going into the 5th next year. I'm located in Montgomery County in Damascus, Maryland, which is about 30 miles north of DC, about an hour drive from the center of the city. And it's me, my dad, and my partner who both get paid in compliments and food. So it's a small but mighty team. I steward 6 acres total of land and actively grow vegetables and flowers on 1 acre, and the remaining 5 are in cover crops year-round to build soil health. The land that I lease is public parkland, state parkland, and it was corn and soybean rotations for over 30 years before I got there. And so building soil health and organic matter so that veggies actually grow and thrive is really important. Well, having land access, and I do have long-term land access in leasing, has been a benefit and a good thing in my farm journey. I farm without water or electricity. So I'm essentially a dry farmer, or when there's drought, I drive to the local river, pump out water into a 300-gallon tank and drive it back to the farm, which of course is challenging on hot days. And then there's no cold storage as well. So that makes going to farmers market challenging if you have to harvest the morning of. And then it also makes storing things long-term challenging. So wholesale has actually been the thing that's been great for me for harvesting same day, dropping off to food distributors that have cold storage. There are many challenges with farming, but I really want to ground and root in kind of the why I farm and what I love about farming. So first is I really feel like I can put my values into action. I was in the nonprofit sector for about a decade, doing racial justice work, community organizing, and a lot of sentiment is like, this is a long-term fight, not going to see it in our lifetime, organizing over direct action. And I really enjoy seeing tangible things. I really enjoy putting a pepper in the ground, getting to see it grow that season, and also putting my values of community in practice through the farm. And then the mission of the farm, even though we are for profit, I really feel like it's a strong social mission behind it, is to celebrate cultural heritage through food. And I come from a long line of farmers, both on my mom and dad's side, and I'm Kenyan from the Kisii tribe. And so I really love daily practice of honoring my ancestors through the practices of regenerative agriculture, but also through the crops that I grow. I really love that connection, and also sharing those crops with the African diaspora folks and folks of various cultures in the DC region. So that's truly the why around why I farm and why I continue to farm, even amongst the challenges that I'm about to name. And these challenges are both ones that I face and then I know are shared by many other young, beginning farmers of color and all those different intersections. So number one being land access. Very difficult to access land that's affordable to lease, and then even more difficult for ownership. So where I am outside DC area, average price of 1 acre is $100,000. And that's just inaccessible. And I know that that is shared across the country. And I want to focus on ownership because it's truly decision-making power. And when we talk about self-determination and decisions you're making over the farm and climate smart practices, regenerating the soil and making this long-term relationship with the earth, ownership and not being fearful that you're going to be kicked off in a couple years or someone else is more profitable and can pay more. That's a sense of stability and way of deepening your connection, I believe. And also when you lease, I do not live on farm. I have to drive 40 minutes to an hour. I don't have an electric vehicle, so it's super unsustainable, both for the planet and for the farmer. It's a lot. And I think that with the history of land theft, the consolidation of farmland in this country, the corporatization of farming, farm ownership is important, and there are some avenues to access it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the USDA and the Farm Service Agency, which has some of the lowest interest rates for ownership, but you need a signed purchasing agreement before you get pre-approved to buy land, which is just, if you see it as home buying, there's no way that you can go into purchasing anything without being pre-approved first. So truly, the origins of that is for family to family transfer within the Farm Service Agency, which we know is also rooted in racialization, discrimination of folks. You cannot access low interest rates and ownership with being not pre-approved when you go in. And it's very rare to find a seller that's going to stay on for those 3 to 6 months for you to get pre-approval from FSA. So thankfully, there is bipartisan legislation, the Farm Ownership Improvement Act, and I can drop the link in after this, that just got proposed to hopefully get pre-approvals through FSA. But the actual steps to take to get to that place where you get self-determination over your days and over your farm, that's one of the steepest barriers, I believe. I also think that supporting local food programs and purchasing programs, as Jose had talked about, is super important. The local food purchasing agreement, LFPA, has been instrumental in my farm. And again, with no water or electricity, that wholesale that I can harvest a good amount of crops the same day, drop it off to someone who has cold storage, that's been amazing for me. And I also know farmers in the local area, and also with fair pricing through the organizations that I've been working with here in Maryland and the DC area. There have also been county level programs that have been in response to COVID-19 supply chain breakdown. Those fundings are kind of rolling back, but the amount of hunger is still there. That hasn't gone away. So I think looking at those programs, local programs that came up in the midst of the pandemic, are also important for local farmers. And then I also want to add that there are programs in conservation and climate smart practices funded through the USDA. And we also know that the USDA as an entity has a history of discriminatory practice. I myself have faced differential treatment within my local county office and state office here in Maryland. This ranges for me and other folks locally from not having applications that you enter in your local office processed or entered at all. Also discouraging farmers from participating in programs by not sharing all the information on it, and also discriminatory lending through the FSA. But I myself have encountered immense challenges with NRCS too. And so why I say that is because there's climate smart funding available. I think it's now $7.7 billion for fiscal year 25. And with the new administration, we don't know what will happen to that funding long term. And there's also that working with the USDA can be complicated because of the history of discrimination within the agency. But I want to say that because it's the complexity that you can apply to a ton of grants and you might not always get them. So I say that to say that the USDA has actually been a part of my farming journey and been beneficial in ways, and also with the adversity of not having applications handled fairly. It's this kind of catch-22 that sometimes that funding is instrumental and can be beneficial to the farm. And there aren't always other supports or community members that can support in that funding. So I think there's a complexity and thing to reflect on. I, of course, don't have all the solutions, but I think it's a little more complex than just don't work with the USDA. There has to be some steps in between working towards our liberation and what is the current reality that we have right now. And then third thing I want to say is that I love this quote that culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a Peter Drucker quote. And so relationship building and local organizing have always been important. I believe even more important now. after the election results. But I say this to say, what is the political education of the farmers? What campaigns are farmer led? I'm talking low wage, beginning, farmers of color, women farmers, farmers across gender spectrum. Who is leading that work around the political education, the popular education? Because I believe that we can, and this is just from my own personal experience and opinion, come up with amazing campaigns and strategies. And if that same power analysis is not shared by folks most impacted, it's not as holistic as it could be. So I really just add that as in the solution to what we create and co-create together. I truly hope that we can center culture in that. But just again, gratitude to the Green New Deal Network. Thank you, Nasim, for this opportunity to be here. Excited to connect with folks, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nia, for sharing your story and for shedding light on this. It's really amazing to learn from you. Please direct any questions in the Q&A. I see a raised hand. Unfortunately, we don't have time right this second to answer questions verbally, but we're happy to answer questions in the Q&A. I'm sure all of our speakers are able to do that. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to State Representative Afton Ben of Tennessee. Afton, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. So I'm State Representative Afton Bain. I represent downtown Nashville, as well as some other neighborhoods in the, as I affectionately call it, the rotting core of the empire. But I have an organizing background. I was actually the statewide organizer for Indivisible during the first Trump administration, and have worked politically at the federal level for a long time, especially in rural policy and rural mobilization. So I do represent an urban district. I was one of the organizers outside the Capitol during the Tennessee 3 debacle, which probably some of you followed. And so I helped to organize all the rallies and protest. And then my state legislator passed away of a heart attack 2 weeks later, and I decided to run. So, but right now and last year, I was the youngest state representative or youngest female in the House, but I'm the freshman rep, and I decided to run on ending the grocery tax. Tennessee is now, I believe, one of 11 states that still taxes food. And we're seeing more and more Republican states eliminate the state portion of their grocery sales tax as we see inflationary costs maintain with grocery prices. And this came from community. I have a housing insecure neighbor, Miss Renee, who showed up my door one day in tears because of how expensive her groceries cost, and she's on a fixed income. And so I said, you know what, I can do something about this. So the bill last year, basically the name of it is ending the grocery tax by closing corporate tax loopholes. If you live in a low tax state for corporations like Tennessee and a lot of the red states, companies, it's corporate rule, to be quite frank. We have companies in Tennessee that have exempted themselves from not only our franchise and excise taxes, but also the sales tax on the necessary merchandise they need to buy their items to do business. And what happens is a mom buying baby formula at Kroger is paying a higher effective tax rate on food than the biggest companies in Tennessee. And so a lot of it has been narrative work. As you know, Tennessee is a Republican trifecta. We are living Project 2025 in Tennessee. And so, you know, coupled with the grocery tax, you know, I've also been in preparation to prepare folks as to what's to come with the Trump administration. But just some learning tips for you all. You know, I have seen outpouring of support across the political spectrum for ending the state's grocery tax. For those of you in red states that currently have a grocery tax, it is an excellent mobilizing and organizing vehicle. And in fact, this session, I out-organized the Republican caucus, and they place, they submitted their bill, which was vouchers, and the second bill is grocery tax. And I've received, I've been on the news, I've been doing interviews for the past 48 hours about the bill, and really defining the narrative around corporate rule in this state and what it means for food accessibility. And so this is an issue of tax justice. It's an issue of economic justice, as you all know. But my organizing recommendation is it is a really, really wonderful campaign that you can adopt and mobilize statewide, and really put pressure. I will say that as we look to the second Trump administration, I'm hyper concerned, and I don't know how it is in some of your states, but our fiscal projections are dire. I attended the state funding board meeting on Monday, and we are they've eroded the corporate tax base so much that there's no money to spend. And so I really worry in the next few years and whatever comes, that not only grocery prices will continue to go up, and people will become more food insecure. But there won't be any money to, for SNAP and a lot of the auxiliary programs that support and ameliorate food insecurity. So I guess I think that's it, but I'm really grateful for this group and grateful to Saul. East Tennessee had been damaged during the flood and Hurricane Helene. And I reserved a U-Haul on my paid for it by my campaign and drove it out in the middle of the night to East Tennessee. And on the way back, I just had a lot of thoughts as to what is to come for the South. And a lot of people want to write off the South, but as Amani, I forget what her last name always said, as goes the South, goes the nation. And in the next decades, we are going to be facing food crises. We are going to be facing mass migration of people from the southern border, as I like to say, your fraternity brother from Orange Beach, Alabama. And people coming up, and we don't have the monetary structure to support any type of enhanced infrastructure. So things are going to get dire, but I know my constituents are grateful that I hold this position, and I would absolutely, a lot of legislators don't have an organizing background, and it's made me very adept and nimble in terms of responding to what's to come. But I texted Saul on the way back from that trip and just said, what is the group thinking about these things? What are legislators going to be running on in terms of food insecurity? Housing guarantees after disaster strike, universal insurance program. And I do think there's a moment of opportunity for the left, especially in the South, as the structures start to crumble. So not a positive note. I'm clearly sick and congested because I've been dealing with a lot this week in the rotting core of the empire, but I'm grateful to this group and grateful to you all, and I'll pass it back.
Thank you so much. Really grateful for all of the work that you do. I appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, please reach out in the chat, and we will answer them as quickly as possible. Up next, we have the Representative Ro Khanna. Thank you so much for being here.
Actually, Daniela, they haven't joined just yet, so they'll be here in about 3 minutes, and then we can have them speak. But in the meantime, I think it might be a good opportunity for Saul to start, and then we can follow back up towards the end.
Hey everyone, it's great to be on with you. Thank you, Representative Bain. It's so good to see you. I'm Saul. I'm the campaigns and political director here at the Green New Deal Network. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about our strategy to win together, all of us. It's so inspiring and honestly energizing in this difficult week in American history to hear from folks who are passing, moving policy on grocery taxes to growing food in the ground, growing food directly to nourish their communities. So yeah, just really grateful to be in community with you all. I want to talk a little bit about our food system and what we're trying to do here, right? I think that a lot of us have spent a lot of time over the past year, as Nia mentioned, trying to get the best parts protected in the Farm Bill and at the USDA, because there are a lot of things in there that are well set up for local farmers. too. Like there are important programs that have been instituted. At the same time, we're all grappling with what Jose mentioned, which is that this is an agency that was set up by and for big ag industry. It was set up by the dairy industry and the egg farm and the egg lobby for them to basically represent themselves and make massive profits and just write off little fines so they can keep going. And that's reflected in the way that our food system is set up, where we have literally tens of millions of hungry people in this country. We have very high emissions from the food and ag industry. We have massive algal blooms in lakes and rivers from overuse of pesticides. And what we want to do with this conversation and ongoing, and what we've been working on building for the past year, is a conversation around how we can change all of that. People deserve better. Farm workers deserve better. Folks who live in rural communities deserve better. Folks who live in Nashville who are paying too much for groceries deserve to have a fair price for healthy and sustainable food. And so over the past year, with that context in mind, we've been building out a campaign and a set of sort of research and organizing projects to develop a conversation with many of the folks who are presenting and who are on the call about a new way forward on the food system, because we're not satisfied with how it's set up and with people being hungry. Last year, we were in Brazil talking to folks about their system of how they require public schools to have healthy and sustainable food supply a high percentage of the nourishment to students, and how that actually drives and allows a diverse set of Black and Indigenous family farmers throughout the country to be able to keep their operations up because of that federal requirement. So we've been around the world and talking to folks all over the United States about what a system could look like that was actually based on people. So with that in mind, right now, what we're undertaking, again, with a lot of folks here, is we're building an intersectional movement to reimagine what the US farm system could be. Like, there shouldn't be hungry people in the richest country in the history of the world. There should not be expanding emissions in a sector where we actually already have the science of how you can have more sustainable food systems. And there shouldn't be people who are in unsafe working condition and unsafe working conditions on farms who are providing what goes on the dinner table of literally hundreds of millions of people. And so we are so excited to be in community with y'all to try and build up that momentum. And where does that start? It starts with breaking the norm and shifting the Overton window on these issues. It should not be acceptable for Democrats or anyone really to take a position that's in favor of big ag industry. But what we've seen is that it's really hard for anyone in rural America or anyone who's buying groceries or working at a grocery store to participate in the fair system the way that this is set up. So we are interested in shifting the position so that the normal Democratic position, and ideally even beyond, is actually about supporting antitrust policy, actually about having a couple of people control what we eat, and whether it's healthy or whether it's sustainable is not something that we accept. So part of it is shifting that narrative. The second thing that we're doing and starting to build out even more in the context of last week is that we're developing state and local food policies and campaigns. And I think that Jose mentioned this. We're very engaged in the Good Food Purchasing Coalition, which we're proud to be a part of, which is around how do we make it so that the government is spending money on sustainable food and supporting farmers. We're also looking at state and local antitrust policies and water policies. On top of that, I think we've been really interested in public food systems. We've been inspired by the story coming out of Montgomery County that Nia shared today, and many others who are benefiting from public lands. And we want to expand those programs, but also allow people to shift towards ownership so people actually have sovereignty and are able to expand the project. And so these are just some examples to go with some more urban examples around. I want to use the example again of the grocery tax policy that Representative Bain brought up. So we're going to be working on driving these policies with state and local partners, some of whom are on the call all over this country, to improve the food system for everyone so that people can actually buy what food they want at a reasonable price, and it will make them healthier, not sicker. And so that's the second piece. And then the third piece is that we don't accept this notion that rural America is a stronghold for the right. And we're interested in rebuilding an alignment. Perhaps it won't surprise you, since we're the Green New Deal Network, that happened during the New Deal, and thinking about what kind of organizing and community conversations do we need to be having to actually center the experiences of farmers and people working in the food system, who are literally feeding food and water for all of us all over the country. How do we actually have a serious conversation about who's supporting those folks? Because if you're in rural America right now, both the Republican and Democratic parties have frankly been catering to the big ag industry and are not actually taking care of folks in those regions, which is a huge percentage of this country. And so we're going to be working with a lot of folks here to build new organizing power to make sure workers are safe on farms, and actually put together agendas that are based on the needs of people in conversations with the most impacted folks, to try and transform our food system that's actually so that it's actually based on people, so that it's actually based on solving climate change and fighting environmental racism, so that it's actually based on developing a safe workplace for anyone who's providing food for the entire country. And so we're really, really excited about that conversation. We've been in community with many folks on this call and other folks who aren't here. And we're going to be building that up. So this is an invitation. We wanted to lay out a few of the key points of our strategy, but it's also an invitation to participate with us, because there's so much that needs to change. But we really believe that the facts are on our side, and the organizing power of these communities is really strong. But we need to start with the impact of what people are feeling, instead of like some vibes about what rural America needs coming from cities. So thanks for listening, and really excited to be in community with you all. And thanks, just seeing a lot of friends on the call, honestly, feels quite emotional in a difficult time. So really appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, Saul. We are going to do one question that I saw in the chat in the Q&A. We can pass it to whoever is available to answer. But that question was, what do folks expect to see from the incoming Trump administration when it comes to national support and financing for small farmers and climate smart ag? I can go ahead and pass it to any of our panelists who are interested in speaking.
I I'm not the person to answer this question. I think Nia or Representative Ben might be better. But I do have a one-word answer, which is unpredictability.
Yeah, I've been studying Project 2025 since the election to see what they want to do. The only thing I saw, they did name NRCS in Project 2025 and said they have too much oversight. Other than that, I'm not sure, because corn and soybean farmers are the most subsidized folks in the government subsidized folks in the country. I think that this is my own prediction, not a fact, that they'll be protected in some ways from programs that have always subsidized corn and soybean for feed. But for at least fiscal year 2025, the Inflation Reduction Act funds will go through, since that fiscal year started October 1st. But that's all I know.
So I grew up in East Tennessee, and I was back home last weekend for an SEC football game, which, for those of you who've never been, highly recommend. But I heard through TVA employees that they are starting preparations for privatization. So the Tennessee Valley Authority, I think within the next few months, will be privatized. Our electric bills will go up, and I think that'll be one of the first kind of tangible increases that people will feel in their pocketbooks besides groceries.
Thank you so much, everyone. All right, we have a lot to do on food and ag, so I'm going to go ahead and share some next steps. Could I get the slide, please? Fantastic. Thank you. We have a shared agenda for food and ag. Please fill out this sign up form, and we'll share our agenda with you for weighing in. We also are hosting a climate rally in DC this coming Sunday. The link is also right there. I'm sure someone will drop that in the chat very shortly. And stay tuned for our next organizing opportunity. We have a lot going on. There's quite a bit to support and move on food, and we're really, really excited to be in partnership with each and every one of you. So thank you so much. I will go ahead and pass it to Kaniela to see if there's anything left.
Yeah, thanks for this. Yeah, I saw some questions, so wanted to hit those if there's any, and anybody else has before we wrap. I think one question was if what happened on Maui. On Maui after the sugar. Well, here's the thing, right? The corporation, one of the big five corporations from the original missionaries in Hawaii that now own that land, they sort of blamed environmental justice activists for the demise of sugar when in reality they knew it was happening for a long time. So they were to pit ag workers against the community that wanted clean air. And I think that's something when we do this work, something that I'm really passionate about is making sure that we have workers and EJ activists together, because ultimately it's the same fight. It's bad land use by corporations. So that caused a lot of divide, so we weren't able to like fall through as much as we'd like. But it ultimately got sold to like a bunch of Canada-owned investors, and so although we were able to, if you look now, it's green again, and it's a lot of like citrus and coffee and other crops. It's more diversified, but it's still very much corporate. And it goes to show that local work is really important, but if you don't actually tackle the incentives that are shaped at the federal level and even the global level, there's only so much you can do. You're like, how are you going to compete with like private equity scale investors and the incentives that force you to grow certain crops? So that's why I'm so passionate in this state and local and federal feedback loop, and really glad to see people at all levels on this call jamming with us. Is Ro coming, Daniela?
They're running late, so we might not make it in time. They weren't sure if they were going to make it in time. But yeah, I think we can wrap up for today. And just appreciate everybody coming out. We'll be in community with y'all going forward. And yeah, Kaniela, anything else before?
No, I mean, I think from my community, and I'm sure the representatives on this call anyone who's ever knocked on doors can pretty much like resonate with this. People don't fall nicely into like left and right spectrums, and people have kind of wild political opinions that span across, different issue areas. But a lot of my folks that supported me, that were volunteer, that supported Bernie Sanders and others, went the way of RFK and ultimately ended up in Trump. And it's because I think the Democratic Party, by and large, have just ignored their concerns, especially around the food sector and health. So, when we do this work, it's for the policy change, but it's also to reestablish that coalition of people who, aren't necessarily driven by like the racist and sexist stuff that their decisions might result in, but just want like clean air and clean water and healthy food for their kids. So the more we kind of get that message out there and own it ourselves, the less it'll be co-optable by the corporations and the authoritarians in this world. So yeah, thanks for being with us all, and really excited for getting into some more good trouble together.